Dontaesboxingnation, Dontaescookingnation. We are out here. Where are we at?
We're out here in Bangkok.
There you go. She's from Ireland. Matter of fact, introduce yourself to the world.
My name's Hannah and I'm from Ireland and I'm the biggest fan in cooking show.
You hear that?
Yeah.
The biggest fan?
And I'm from Ireland. Sorry.
No, I can edit it, don't worry about it. All the way in Bangkok, Thailand, y'all.
No,
I'm gonna get
in
it right.
Ireland as well.
In Ireland, you hear that? DBN is international,
My
guys.
churros are ready now.
Mayweather is no doubt about it. In my mind, in Mosley's mind, in anybody's mind now, that he is the best. He keeps on proving it over and over and over again. And tonight convinced me, I have to say the truth, convinced me that he is the best. Possibly, there's obviously a lot of people who will say and who can argue this, but of all time, Mayweather has the skills to beat anybody. He has the talent, he has the work ethic, and people all over the world are becoming fans of the talent he possesses, so we really have to commend him for that.
If anybody followed my career here, you always know that I fucking fought the best. That's all I have to say. And who's the best? Floyd Mayweather.
Dontaesboxingnation, what's going on, guys? So I got some news that's about to really hurt the racist fans' feelings right now. Floyd Mayweather has just been rated as the greatest fighter of all time. He was already rated as the greatest fighter of this era before this, but now he's been rated as the greatest fighter of all time by BoxRec.com. Now, it makes sense, and I'm going to break it down, but what doesn't make sense is they have Manny Pacquiao at number 2. That is completely ridiculous. But we're going to talk about that later on in this video. Let's talk about Floyd Mayweather first. Those two clips that I played with Oscar De La Hoya talking. The first clip, as you guys seen, that was back in 2010. That was at the post-fight press conference right after Floyd Mayweather dominated Sugar Shane Mosley. Now, it's important to note that at the time that Floyd Mayweather fought Shane Mosley, fans were accusing Floyd of ducking Shane Mosley. Shane was considered the #1 welterweight in the world. It was kind of like Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, where there was always a debate on who the best welterweight was. Not only was Shane Mosley considered the #1 best welterweight in the world at the time, he was also on the pound for pound list. He was rated as pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world, top 10. Floyd Mayweather completely dominated him. Now, what makes what Oscar De La Hoya said about Floyd Mayweather so impactful, so deep, is the fact you seldomly hear boxers admit that their rival is the greatest fighter of all time. Joe Frazier, he never said this about Ali. Neither did Sonny Liston. Neither did George Foreman, right? Tommy Hearns, Hagler, Duran, they never said this about Sugar Ray Leonard. So it's a hell of an endorsement when someone like Oscar De La Hoya says it. And remember, he said this over 10 years ago, and then I played the clip of him saying it again recently. And that's with him not even liking Floyd Mayweather personally. That's when you know he's being honest. Of course, in that clip, I don't know if you guys noticed, but he was a little tipsy, so the truth was really coming out when he was talking about that. Floyd Mayweather has the most impressive resume in boxing history in terms of dominance, in terms of dealing with adversity, dealing with so many different styles. I mean, if you look at all of the greatest fighters of all time, look at all the styles that Floyd Mayweather had to defeat. From a Manny Pacquiao, to a Canelo Alvarez, to a Ricky Hatton, to a Zab Judah, to a Shane Mosley, right? And I'm only naming a few. To a rough and rugged Marcos Maidana, and even a Castillo. Let's not forget Oscar De La Hoya, who had height and tremendous hand speed. Not to mention he was like 20 pounds bigger than Floyd Mayweather the night of the fight as well. Speaking of fighters being bigger than Floyd, a lot of his opponents were much bigger than him in some of his most impressive wins. Floyd Mayweather has beat more fighters on the pound-for-pound list than any other fighter. I mean, just to understand how impressive that is, imagine if there was a fighter today that had beat 4 to 6 fighters on the current pound-for-pound list today, no matter what your pound-for-pound list is. Just imagine what you would be saying about a fighter that was able to accomplish something like that. I told you guys in one of my recent videos, people always try to say, oh, Canelo, he's just doing all the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. And I explained to you, actually, he's doing the opposite. Canelo Alvarez is often fighting guys coming off of their worst performances. Floyd Mayweather was always fighting someone coming off of their biggest win. And when I talked about this in a previous video, some of you guys said, well, hey, what about Zab Judah? He didn't fight him coming off of his biggest win. And that's true, he didn't. Zab was the only one. But in that situation, Floyd Mayweather and Zab Judah, they were scheduled to fight next, assuming Zab Judah got past Carlos Baldomir. At the time, Mayweather versus Zab Judah was like the biggest fight. It was one of the biggest fights in the entire sport. So what happened? Zab Judah, he loses to Carlos Baldomir. Floyd Mayweather, he ends up fighting against Zab Judah. But who did he fight after he beat Zab Judah? The guy that beat Carlos Baldomir. Once again, a guy coming off of the biggest win of his career, right? Now, if Floyd Mayweather would have only went after the loser and he didn't fight the guy that beat Zab Judah, then that would be a bad look when it comes to Floyd. But he didn't do that. He did what you're supposed to do. He beat this man, and then he beat the man that beat him. Now, listen, guys, when it comes to conversations of who's greater out of Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, those conversations are really not up for debate. The only reason why people even talk about this is because of the racism that exists in the sport of boxing. Because if racism didn't exist, no one would be trying to compare the loser to the winner. There's a reason why the whole world wanted to watch this fight. Because this fight was going to determine who's the best fighter of this era. Even Freddie Roach admitted that if Floyd Mayweather beats Manny Pacquiao, Floyd is considered the best of this era, hands down. Matter of fact, let me play the clip.
Now, Freddie, obviously, you believe Manny Pacquiao is going to win the fight. I'm just saying, hypothetically, something that's not supposed to happen actually occurs that night, and Floyd wins the fight decisively. 2 questions. If Manny Pacquiao wins the fight, where do you rate him as an all-time great? If Mayweather wins the fight, same question.
I think it's a good win for Mayweather if he wins the fight. Pacquiao is, again, I think, like, you know, if you want to go with the history of boxing and go with all the boxers out there that from ever, like, are you talking about the best of ever or the best of just his era? I think he might be the best fighter for his era. Yes.
So like top 20, top 15,
no,
top 5?
Best fighter of his era right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because he's like undefeated and very good.
Okay, so that was an interview I did with Freddie Roach at his gym right before the Mayweather versus Pacquiao fight. Do you guys notice when I asked him the question, if Manny Pacquiao wins or if Floyd Mayweather wins, where do you rate them? Do you guys notice he never even mentioned Manny Pacquiao's name? He only talked about Floyd Mayweather. In fact, he was talking as if Floyd had already beat Manny Pacquiao. He was saying Floyd Mayweather is definitely the best fighter of this era. I think Freddie Roach always felt deep down Floyd Mayweather was going to beat his fighter Manny Pacquiao. I remember when this fight was first signed, the first thing Freddie Roach said is this is going to be a very difficult fight. It's going to be a difficult fight to win. Floyd Mayweather doesn't make too many mistakes. This is exactly what he said. So while Freddie Roach is damn near panicking, you know, Floyd Sr. and Floyd Mayweather, they're talking with all the confidence in the world. And the fight played out just like that, with the most confident fighter winning. So you racists out there, boy, that's really gotta hurt your feelings when you hear even Manny Pacquiao's trainer admitting that Floyd Mayweather is better. You can't argue against this man's trainer telling you that Floyd Mayweather is better. But you know what? Just to beat a dead horse, let me really break this down to where even a racist can understand it. So you race fans, I want you guys to imagine the man you hate right now, Floyd Mayweather, right? Imagine if Floyd Mayweather had already been knocked out 2 times. I'm talking about before he became a superstar. He had already been knocked out twice. He fights Juan Manuel Marquez 4 times and struggles every single time he fights him. And in the 4th fight, Floyd gets knocked out cold by Juan Manuel Marquez. Then Manny Pacquiao comes along and he completely dominates Marquez in 1 fight. Then after the world has been asking for this Mayweather versus Pacquiao fight for so many years, they finally get in the ring and Manny Pacquiao beats Floyd Mayweather. Race fans, be honest in your heart right now. Regardless of how many accomplishments Floyd Mayweather has, would you be calling Floyd Mayweather greater than Manny Pacquiao in that scenario? And we already know the answer. You know, I ran into a brother out here in Thailand who's actually a fighter and he's a fan of my channel. And we started talking boxing and he was telling me how people are saying that Manny Pacquiao is actually greater than Floyd Mayweather. And I asked him the same scenario that I asked you guys. I said, if Floyd Mayweather had been knocked out 3 times, lost to Manny Pacquiao, got knocked out by Marquez, would there be anybody saying that Floyd Mayweather was the greatest fighter of all time or even greater than the guy he lost to, Manny Pacquiao? I asked this guy this question and he said no. And this guy was on some coon shit and he still said no. So like I said, man, if we're being realistic, it's not even up for debate. People only have these conversations because of the racism that exists in the sport of boxing. I tell you guys all the time, boxing is based on race, nationality, and pride in that order. And we see this play out every day in the sport of boxing. Do you ever notice whenever people try to give Floyd Mayweather backhand compliments by calling him the greatest defensive fighter of all time, do you guys notice they never talk about who's the best offensive fighter of all time? They don't do it because they made up this ridiculous term to kind of discredit Floyd Mayweather. If you think about it, Floyd Mayweather is also the best offensive fighter because we're talking about numbers. Who is the most accurate puncher in the sport of boxing? It's Floyd Mayweather. Who lands the highest percentage of punches? It's Floyd Mayweather. How do you think Floyd Mayweather outlanded every single fighter that he has faced? Because you can't win fights with defense alone. These are code words they only use for black fighters. How come they never call Willie Pep the best defensive fighter of all time? How come they never call Lomachenko one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time? We know what time it is. But like I said, numbers don't lie. For these racists saying that Floyd Mayweather is the best defensive fighter in the world, it helps ease the pain when they have to admit that this man is the best. Now let's talk about Manny Pacquiao being listed number 2 as the greatest fighter of all time? So you mean to tell me all this time we've been saying that Sugar Ray Robinson or Muhammad Ali is the greatest of all time, and then just like that, a man that actually loses to Floyd Mayweather, he's supposed to be greater than all of them? The logic makes no sense. See, this is what you guys have to understand. What makes fighters like Floyd Mayweather, Sugar Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, Pernell Whitaker, Sugar Ray Leonard, you know what really made these fighters greats? I mean, top of the level, elite greats. You know what really made them greats? Was the fact that they won the most important fights of their career. Manny Pacquiao is definitely a great fighter, but let's be honest. What are the 2 biggest fights of his career? The 2 biggest fights of his career was Floyd Mayweather and Juan Manuel Marquez. Manny Pacquiao, he fought Marquez 4 times. Muhammad Ali, he fought Joe Frazier 3 times. That is a serious rivalry. And Manny Pacquiao, he lost that rivalry against Marquez, got knocked out by this man. Now, granted, I will say that Manny Pacquiao, he definitely has some big wins though. I would say his 2 biggest wins, with no controversy, was his trilogy that he won against Eric Morales and his win over Marco Antonio Barrera. Those to me are his biggest 2 wins of his career. But unfortunately for Manny Pacquiao, he lost the most important fight of his career, and that was the fight of the century against Floyd Mayweather. That's what it was billed, the fight of the century. Can you imagine the pressure that was on Manny Pacquiao going into that fight, right? You can't be greater than fighters like, once again, Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard, and all the other names I mentioned, because those fighters, they actually won the most important fights of their career. Sugar Ray Leonard, he beat Duran in the trilogy. He beat Hagler, he beat Hearns, he beat Wilfredo Benitez. Ali beat Frazier, Sonny Liston, George Foreman, right? Pernell Whitaker, he won the most important fights of his career. Andre Ward, Bernard Hopkins, all of these guys won the most important fights of their career. So you can't even put Manny Pacquiao in the top 10. I mean, it would be generous to put him at the bottom 10, but I could definitely tell you there are at least 10 other fighters that won the most important fights of their career. And Manny Pacquiao's not one of them, at least not one to do it consistently. Once again, he got the win over Barrera. He got the win over Morales, right? And when it comes to like a lot of his other wins, like wins over Shane Mosley, Ricky Hatton, Margarito, and all of these guys, just like Canelo's situation, the majority of those guys were coming off of recent losses or knockout losses, right? So while those were good wins, they weren't as impressive as Manny Pacquiao once again beating a Barrera or a Morales, because those guys at the time, they weren't coming off of being knocked out. They were in their prime when Manny Pacquiao beat them. Okay, so now we move on to Carlos Monzon. Now, guys, let me just make this clear. I noticed this pattern. Every single time old media, they do the right thing by putting the right guy at the number 1 spot, they always make sure they put some ridiculous names right below his name. They did this when they rated Floyd Mayweather as the greatest fighter in the last 25 years. It's almost as if they feel that as long as they put Floyd Mayweather's name at number 1, they can sneak in whatever name they want undetected. Nobody will really notice it. That ain't happening. Once again, man, do you know how disrespectful it is? Everyone has been calling Sugar Ray Robinson the greatest fighter of all time. And out of nowhere, you decide to just put Carlos Monzon above him? Guys, you know how you always hear these race fans use these code words whenever a black fighter is chasing a Latino fighter or someone who's not black? What do they always say? To protect the guy who's running, these race fans, they always use these code words. Well, who did he fight? Who did the black guy fight, right? Like implying that they don't want the black fighter to get his hands on that guy because he ain't fought nobody, right? At least this is what they always say. They always ask this question. The funny thing is that question should not apply when the guy who's chasing him wants to fight him. You should only be asking a question like that in a case like this, where we're talking about fighters that are perceived as the greatest of all time or top 10, one of the greatest, whatever the case. That's when you ask the question, who has he fought? Who has he beat? You don't say that when there's a guy out there that wants all the smoke, because if these guys stop ducking, then we will know who he beat. I mean, just imagine one of these boxers chasing another boxer down the street. This man running for his life, and he turning around, looking at the dude who's chasing him, and he says, who have you beat? While he running his ass off. Does that make any sense? Of course not. So when it comes to Carlos Monzon, who did he beat? Where are the Manny Pacquiao names? Where are the Canelo Alvarez names? Where are the Haglers, the Hearns, the Sugar Ray Leonards? the Fraziers. Where are those names on this man's record? They are not there. If you look up Carlos Monzon's record, you'll see a whole bunch of fighters with like 22 losses, 30 losses, 15 losses. Just go to BoxRec right now and look up Carlos Monzon's record. Look at his opponents. Who did this man beat? See, people want to praise him because he held the middleweight title for so long and he had all these title defenses. But title defenses against who? He never defended against Marvin Hagler. And I'm not saying that he was supposed to at the time. I'm not saying he ducked him. But once again, he does not have the names on his record. You could defend the title 100 times. If you're not fighting anyone, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. I keep talking about the important wins that you get in your career. And what are the important wins that Carlos Monzon got? It's not his fault, but Carlos Monzon, he didn't get any of the big names in the ring. So it's ridiculous to say that this man is top 3, the greatest fighter of all time over Sugar Ray Robinson and Muhammad Ali, and the list goes on and on and on. It makes no sense. Like I said, when it comes to Floyd Mayweather, I can tell you right now, there are a lot of people that Floyd Mayweather beat that would most likely beat a lot of these other fighters that are on this pound for pound greatest of all time list. For sure. You put them in the same weight class, same division. I'm not going to say Carlos Monzon would lose to all of them, but he wouldn't beat them all, that's for sure. It's not about how many wins you get. It's not about how many times you defend your title. It's about who you beat. That's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. Now, when you combine who you beat with the impressive record, that's when that record means something. But not if you don't have the names to go with the record. So at the end of the day, that is a huge statement for a website like BoxRec, because they're one of the most biased websites in boxing. For them to admit that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest of all time, that's huge. So with that being said, I'm gonna wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
My name is Chris, and I'm all the way here from Anchorage, Alaska at ScalpCarolinas, and I'm here for my second treatment of SMP. Well, I was sitting at home one day and going over my Facebook page, and they have different, like advertisements popping up, and I saw one for SMP. And I saw some pictures of some guys, a before and after, and I was looking at that, and it caught my attention. So I Googled it. SMP, nothing showed up in my area. So, I did a little more research, and all of a sudden, ScalpCarolinas popped up in the web browser. So I started watching his videos and seeing all the reaction from all the other people. We talked on the phone, we made appointments and everything. I sent him pictures, and he looked at them, and I was like, can you fix this? And, he pretty much said, no problem. My first session, he made me feel extremely comfortable. It was almost like I was talking to family. He started, and during the whole treatment, we talked and, about our families and our life, and, and things that he does and things that I do. And before I know it, the first session was over. When you see someone doing something that they love, as much as I see Enoch Glover love what he does, it shows in his work. I wouldn't point anyone in any other direction but here to North Carolina, ScalpCarolinas, to get this done.
All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called LO Key Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to LODkey.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram.